Have you ever had one of those moments where you look at the news and feel like a single week somehow managed to pack in a decade's worth of history? We just came through a stretch of days, from last Wednesday right through the weekend, that felt exactly like that. It is almost giving me a sense of whiplash. We are looking at a world that is simultaneously touching the very edges of science fiction, while violently pulling itself back into the dark ages.
Whiplash is the perfect word for it. It really feels like humanity is stepping on the gas pedal and the emergency brake at the exact same time. When you look at the sheer density of events over the past few days, it is staggering. We are watching the architecture of the global order shift in real time. It is not just one isolated crisis or one random breakthrough. Everything is bleeding together. The economy, the battlefields, the algorithms, and the streets, they are all part of the same tangled web right now.
Let us untangle that web, starting with the most jarring contrast. On one hand, over the weekend, we saw tech giants casually announcing artificial intelligence breakthroughs that could fundamentally alter human labor. We are talking about neural networks that are now capable of autonomous reasoning, essentially doing the heavy lifting of entire corporate departments. But at the exact same moment, we have millions of people taking to the streets in major capitals, fighting over the basic cost of bread and heating. How do we reconcile a world that is building digital gods but cannot seem to feed its own people?
You cannot reconcile it. And I think that is exactly why we are seeing such intense social struggles right now. What we witnessed on the streets this past week is the boiling point of extreme social inequality. The economic numbers came out, and sure, the stock markets are hitting record highs, fueled entirely by this technological boom you mentioned. But the K-shaped recovery we have been warned about is no longer a theory, it is the reality. The line pointing up represents the capital owners in the tech sectors. The line pointing down is everyone else. When inflation outpaces wages for this long, people do not just get frustrated, they get desperate. And desperation is what transforms a quiet society into a loud, unpredictable one.
That unpredictability is spilling over into the political arena, isn't it? The rhetoric from the emergency political summits late last week felt entirely different. It was not the usual diplomatic theatre. It felt raw, almost panicked. You have incumbents terrified of being ousted by populist waves, and challengers capitalizing on this massive wave of economic anxiety. It feels like the social contract is not just fraying, it is being actively torn up.
Precisely. And when domestic politics become unstable, politicians look for external distractions. That is a tale as old as time. It is no coincidence that just as these internal social struggles reached a fever pitch over the weekend, we saw a sudden, sharp escalation in kinetic military activity. The artillery exchanges we saw across those highly contested borders were not just routine skirmishes, they were calculated displays of force. When the economy fails to unite a population, leaders often turn to nationalism and conflict to force that unity.
Which brings a terrifying element into the mix, because these military strikes are not just about land anymore. Over the weekend, the rhetoric surrounding those strikes shifted heavily into religious territory. We are seeing modern, hyper-advanced weaponry drones directed by satellite and AI being used to fight over ancient, sacred fault lines. It is a bizarre and terrifying juxtaposition. You have laser-guided munitions being justified by centuries-old religious texts.
It is the ultimate paradox of our time. We have 21st century weapons being commanded by medieval mentalities. Religion is being weaponized to give a divine mandate to what are essentially territorial and resource grabs. When you convince a soldier or a citizen that an economic or political war is actually a holy war, you remove all the rules of engagement. Compromise becomes a sin. And that is why the sectarian violence we tracked over the past few days is so incredibly dangerous. It removes the possibility of a rational, diplomatic off-ramp.
Speaking of removing off-ramps and the blending of technology with chaos, I want to pivot to something that sent chills down my spine this week. Amidst all the noise of the protests and the border clashes, there was a story that almost flew under the radar. The disappearance of that high-profile financial whistleblower, combined with the massive, completely untraceable cyber heist from a major institutional vault, It sounds like something straight out of a cyberpunk novel, but it happened right in front of us.
That story is the dark underbelly of the technological advancements we were praising earlier. What makes this unsolved crime so fascinating and terrifying is the sheer sophistication of it. This was not a smash and grab. The digital vault was emptied, using an algorithmic bypass that left absolutely no fingerprints. Billions in digital assets, just gone. And the fact that the one person who was threatening to expose the vulnerabilities in that exact financial network vanished 48 hours prior, it strains the limits of coincidence.
It really does. It makes you wonder about the nature of power today. We usually think of power as tanks rolling across a border or politicians signing treaties, but this heist suggests that true power might be entirely invisible. If someone can siphon the equivalent of a small nation's GDP over a weekend and vanish into the digital ether without a trace, who is really running the world?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question. We are entering an era where the most devastating attacks are silent. You do not need to drop a bomb to cripple a nation. You just need to compromise its financial ledger or its power grid. This unsolved crime is a massive red flag. It shows that our technological capabilities have vastly outpaced our regulatory and security frameworks. We have built a house with a state-of-the-art entertainment system, but we forgot to put locks on the doors.
And while the invisible thieves are emptying the vault, the people on the street are fighting over scraps. It all connects, doesn't it? The technological leaps enable the massive wealth concentration. That wealth concentration deepens the social inequalities. The inequalities spark protests and political instability. The instability triggers military action and the stoking of religious conflicts as a distraction. It is a perfectly closed loop of modern chaos.
A closed loop is exactly what it is. And the tragedy is that the tools that could break this loop are the very ones being used to reinforce it. The advancements in AI we saw this week could theoretically be used to optimize resource distribution, solve supply chain crises, and elevate the global standard of living. Instead, they are being deployed to automate trading algorithms, generate deepfake political propaganda, and engineer more efficient weapons of war. It is a profound failure of human imagination. We have the tools of gods, but we are still using them to fight over the same patches of dirt.
So where does this leave us? We have looked back at a week that has shown us the absolute extremes of human capability. We can rewrite the code of digital existence. Yet, we cannot solve the oldest problems of greed, tribalism, and violence. Are we just doomed to keep accelerating into the wall? Or is there a way to steer this ship before it breaks apart?
I think the answer depends on whether we can bridge the empathy gap. Right now, the people making the decisions at the very top of the economic and technological pyramids are completely insulated from the consequences of their actions. They do not feel the sting of inflation, they do not fight in the kinetic wars, and their neighborhoods are not the ones burning during the social struggles. Until the architects of our future are forced to live in the reality they are creating for the rest of us, the acceleration will continue. But history shows us that insulation never lasts forever. Eventually, the reality of the streets always reaches the gates of the palaces.
A sobering thought to carry forward. We are living in an age of miracles and nightmares, often separated by nothing more than a news cycle. As we watch these technological marvels unfold, alongside ancient hatreds and modern inequalities, the real question isn't what technology will do next. The question is what we will choose to do with it, and whether we can remember our shared humanity before the algorithms and the artillery make us forget it entirely.